Here at the Sunwatch Indian Village here in Dayton, Ohio, walking through a replica of what a Fort Ancient Indian culture would have looked like back in those days when they inhabited these lands. Continue to follow me as we explore more of this place. As we make our way up to the Sunwatch Indian Village, I like how they have these signs with the lineage of Native Americans in the Ohio River Valley, starting all the way back to the first Americans over 15,000 years ago when the glaciers were melting, to the late woodland Indians just short of when Columbus discovered America in 1492. Just getting ready to head down to the Sunwatch Indian Village, so make sure you follow me as we head that way and check out some prehistoric ancient Indian cultures. In my video at the Leo petroglyphs, I briefly talked about the Fort Ancients, but let's dig in a little more in this episode. The Fort Ancients were named after the Fort Ancient Ohio Archaeological Site, which is Ohio's first state park. The Fort Ancient site that gives the group of Native Americans its name is North America's largest ancient hilltop enclosure, and it was built around 2,000 years ago. This place was thought to be a social and ceremonial gathering place. The Dina and Hopewell are believed to be the predecessors of the Fort Ancients. What caused this shift from a more nomadic culture to a more sedentary culture with the Fort Ancients? This was in part due to the Fort Ancients' ability as great planters and hunters. As this Native American culture began growing crops in sufficient amounts and hunting deer and other animals, they tended to stay in the same place for longer periods of time than their predecessors, but they were still partly nomadic. Some of the reasons they left sites were due to resource scarcity, natural events, and many cities were built just for religious and ceremonial gatherings. Farming and foraging here at Sunwatch were the responsibility of the women. Seeds were planted in April when the sun was viewed from the big house eclipsing the cedar pole. At this site, the Fort Ancients grew crops such as beans, squash, sunflower, and more. Corn was one of their main staples to their diet. Corn, bean, and squash together were called the Three Sisters. Corn provided support for the beans to climb, while squash leaves covered the ground to suppress the weeds. The second main reason the Fort Ancients tended to stay in areas longer were due to their hunting of deer and other animals. White-tailed deer was the most important animal to the Fort Ancients, and every part of the deer was used for a certain purpose. Hides were tanned for clothing, bone and antlers provided material for many of the tools they used for everyday tasks. The third main reason for their more sedentary lifestyle was due to their abilities to travel in canoes. Here at the Sunwatch Village, the Great Miami River was their highway, where they traded for the resources they needed. Fort Ancients, like many evolved cultures of our past, have advanced knowledge of celestial events like the Mayan and the Cahokians, which I did an episode on, so make sure you check that out as well. As in Cahokia, where they had Woodhenge as a solar calendar, so does the Fort Ancients here at Sunwatch. Now let's make our way into the big house. This was the largest building in the village, and it was used for ceremonies and gatherings. Building houses here at Sunwatch consisted of cutting down of trees, stripping their bark, and curing. Before being set, the timber was charred to prevent rotting and insects. Horizontal poles were lashed to vertical poles. Grass was then tied to the walls and plastered with a mud daub of clay and chopped grass. A-frames provided support for the roof. Roofs used blue stem grass, tying it in bundles and lashing them to the roof. As we were watching the movie in the visitor center, it said this was one of the most important vantage points. Looking through this door to that cedar pole out there, they were well versed in celestial alignments, and when they lined up the right way using that pole, it would tell them when planting season began and when to harvest their crops. Let's head out of the main building and check out more of this property. The Fort Ancients started to shift away from building huge mounds like the Adena and the Hopewell cultures. They focused their efforts on smaller mounds for burials and built effigy mounds instead. Two of their most famous effigy mounds were the Great Serpent Mound and Alligator Mound. Now let's spend a little time talking about how the Sunwatch Village was set up and how they knew where everything was located to rebuild this village. The Sunwatch Village was built in a circle with a stockade around the perimeter. In the middle was a central plaza with a 40-foot cedar pole that was used as a solar calendar. This whole village was closely related from a female bloodline, not by the men. The village was divided by pie-shaped wedges for each family. Now, how did they know where things were located in this village? They used extensive excavations that started in 1971, and they found subtle traces of architecture below the surface. Continuing to walk through here at the Sunwatch Indian Village. Just like all other advanced ancient cultures, they used the celestial alignments to let them know every part of their day, and depending on the way the sun hit the pole and the shadows were cast, let them know how to do different daily tasks such as planting, harvesting, and other various things. I don't know how well it'll show on this video, but these earthen mounds here were used for burial of the inhabitants of this village. You also got some more over here. Let's head to the next building, which had an importance in this village. This building we are about to walk in lined up with a cedar pole and cast a shadow in the plaza to indicate the winter solstice. The winter solstice is the shortest day of the year, with the longest night. The winter solstice represents a time of celebration, as the sun is symbolically reborn, and the days following become progressively longer. We had a great time here at the Sunwatch Indian Village. I was here with the Toll Road and Road Trip Rich. This was a great experience. I want to thank everybody for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, help grow the channel. Until the next one.